My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of humans during the fascinating times when the desire of ages, Jesus the Messiah, came to this earth. And they're collected in this book, Victory of the Warrior King, the story of the life of Jesus. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words parental guidance recommended. David, Bethlehem, hillside. David stared into the crackling fire and yawned. Everyone in his family was tired, for the night before his mother had given birth to a fine, healthy son. It had prompted great rejoicing, but little sleep. The boy had spent the night running every few hours between the men on the hillside watching the sheep and his home in the village, checking to see if the child had been born yet. David had not been very old when his sisters had been born, and he did not remember the screams and moans that accompanied labor and childbirth. The sounds of his mother's suffering had threatened to rip his heart out of him, yet now it was all over. He shifted his position and smiled. Another boy in the family? Now he had a brother. "What are you smiling about?" Jacob, an older herdsman sitting near the bubbling pot of stew, asked him. The boy shook his head. "Just thinking about my brother," he said proudly. "Ah, yes," the older shepherd sighed. "The birth of every male brings hope to those of us who still believe in the traditions of our ancestors. We long for each one to be more than just another mouth to feed, more than just someone to herd flocks or toil in the fields." The others nodded. "May he be the consolation of Israel." The consolation. It was a word that some used to refer to the Messiah. David smiled. Wouldn't it be wonderful if his little brother was the Messiah? Every woman in Israel hoped her child would be the coming Messiah. "It is possible, isn't it?" David asked after some thought. "We were talking the other night about the prophecies. Don't some expect the Messiah soon?" Most of the shepherds nodded. "And isn't he supposed to be born here in Bethlehem?" David continued. Again the other shepherds expressed their agreement. "I don't know," Shimeon said, slowly throwing some branches into the fire. "Our people have been talking about the Messiah and expecting him for thousands of years. I wonder if he's any more likely to show up tonight than last night. I think the consolation is all in our heads." Rumbles of disagreement spread through the small band of shepherds. "No, I think he should be coming soon," Jacob protested. "I've heard that last year one of the priests in Jerusalem had an angel appear to him and tell him that the Messiah was soon to be born." "Some claim that he was just a senile old priest who had a stroke while he was on altar duty," Shimeon interrupted. No, I heard he was a good and devout man," someone else protested. "Well," Shimeon replied, "at any rate, he wasn't able even to speak or function normally for months after that. Almost a year." The shepherds started arguing among each other. "Well," David said finally, "whether the priest had a stroke or not, I believe in the Messiah, and I'll be glad to see him." Shimeon fell silent and went back to poking the fire with a stick. I could hardly contain my excitement as I saw the host of angels gathering on the hillside. Heaven had summoned many from their other duties for this special event. Bursting with their good news, they planned to tell the shepherds that the Messiah was about to arrive. "Now, don't scare them to death," I admonished them. "Remember, these are humans. They frighten easily." One angel decided to materialize and allow the shepherds to adjust to his presence before the rest appeared. Even then, David and the other shepherds flung themselves with shrieks of terror on the ground, shielding their eyes from his brightness. "Don't be afraid," the angel told them. I nodded as if to say, "What did I tell you?" It took him several minutes to get them to stop shaking and to listen to what he had to say. "Your consolation has arrived," he said. "The Messiah is born." The shepherds were too shocked to respond and just gaped at him. "He's in Bethlehem even now," the angel explained gently to them. You will find him wrapped in swaddling clothes, but lying in a manger. A manger? It sounded as odd to me as it did to the shepherds. Hardly a place to put any baby, much less an infant king. Then the rest of the angels could contain themselves no longer. The entire hillside and sky filled with their glowing forms as they shouted and sang with joy about the birth of the Messiah. I joined in with the singing, although with my duties I was not permitted to appear. The other angels were the only beings allowed to manifest themselves tonight, and they wanted to express all their joy and make it a truly spectacular celebration. And it was. As the light died from the sky and David's eyes became used to the darkness again, he asked his fellow shepherds, "Well, shall we go find him?" "Yes, yes," cried the others. Even Shimeon, their resident cynic, agreed. "What about the sheep?" Jacob asked. "And we won't be gone too long. If the Almighty cared enough to send angels to tell us the Messiah is born, I'm sure he'll keep our sheep safe." "Then let's go!" David shouted. "Let's find this baby." In the back of his mind, he kept wondering, could it be my little brother? But where do they find a manger? What an honor it would be to have the Messiah for a little brother. The shepherds rushed into the village of Bethlehem. David stopped by his home. It was dark. Only the coals from the night's fire lay glowing. His sisters, mother, and the tiny baby were sound asleep together on the raised platform in his one-room home. The donkey was tied on the other side. She opened her eyes and glanced at David, then closed them again. No manger. Emerging from the house, he caught up quickly with the rest of his fellow shepherds. "I suppose that was a stupid idea anyway," he thought. "The Messiah would never come from my family." By this time, one of the shepherds had checked at the inn. No baby born there that night, but the innkeeper recalled a couple looking for somewhere to rest earlier that evening. He had directed them toward the limestone caves on the other side of town, where many people stabled their animals, for the inn was full, and the couple apparently did not have kin to provide them lodging. The floors in the inn's rooms and even the courtyard were packed with sleeping bodies. The shepherds were familiar with the limestone caves and hurried in that direction. Sure enough, they spotted a flicker of light in one of the caves. As they approached it, they saw a young girl curled up in the corner, her back resting against a mound of straw and holding a tiny baby. The infant was wrapped tightly in swaddling bands, as all healthy babies were. All newborns were bathed and rubbed with salt, and then wrapped tightly in swaddling clothes to provide them a sense of security and warmth and to help their limbs grow straight and strong. The shepherd silently filed into the cave and without saying a word knelt before the baby. Finally Jacob spoke. "It is the Messiah, and we've come to worship him." An older man entered the cave. Seeing the rough shepherds, he looked alarmed, but the young mother smiled at him. He stood by her protectively. "They've come to worship him, Joseph," she said. The husband stared as the shepherds bowed their heads. Mary turned and laid the baby back in the manger. "His name is Yeshua," she told them. The shepherds nodded. The name meant "the Lord is salvation." It was a common Hebrew name, but a good one for the Messiah. The shepherds remained on their knees for some minutes, then shyly filed back outside. "What an honor to be the first visitors to the baby king," they must have thought to themselves. Surely he would have many rich and important visitors soon and be moved from the cave, but for now joy filled their hearts. "I can't believe the angels told us first," David commented. "Maybe the Almighty has a soft spot in his heart for shepherds," Jacob replied. Shimeon shook his head. "I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it." David chuckled. "I guess the old priest was right." "I guess he was," Shimeon said slowly. "What an honor! For a group of poor shepherds like us, what an honor!" I nodded. It was an honor, yet I felt stunned and angry that the only people waiting for the Messiah tonight were this tiny group of shepherds on the hillside. The Almighty had given the announcement first to the priest through Zechariah, and then all Israel at the temple. Where was everyone? Certainly not here in Bethlehem. David, Bethlehem, later. Life, David mused to himself, just never turns out to be quite what you were expecting. Certainly not my life, anyway. Angrily, he kicked at the dust with his bare foot. He had been so excited the night of the happening, as the shepherds still referred to it. They had seen angels, at least they thought they had, all of them, and they had worshipped the baby born in the stable, but no one else came. Surely if this had been the Messiah, someone else would have recognized his existence by now. The couple with the Messiah baby was as poor as anyone else that lived in Bethlehem. The young father had done some odd carpentry jobs in the town and earned a little money, so that they were able to rent a small one-room house. While it was a little better than a stable, it still seemed far beneath the dignity of a king. And the baby king was not the only disappointment. Something had happened to his father. David's father. He and Mother had been mumbling in low tones, and there had been some crying for several nights. But that often happened between his parents, and he rarely paid attention to it. Before, they had always seemed to work their differences out. But now, Father was gone. Mother would not say where, just that he wasn't coming back. "It makes no sense," Jacob commented to David one day. "If your father wanted to divorce your mother, he could have done that. Then he could have still kept the house and his belongings and sent her back to her father. But no, he just disappears. Where did he go?" "I don't know," David said numbly. "And your mother will say nothing." "Well, she hasn't told me anything either, but life without father's getting harder." Mother had had to sell the flock, so David was no longer a shepherd. Now he hung around town offering to do any odd jobs he could, usually in exchange for food or firewood or other items he and his family needed. "Well," Jacob sighed, "it's a mystery, but most of these things do come out in the end. Very few things can stay hidden forever, and then everyone will know what evil secret your mother is hiding." David bristled. "How do you know it's evil?" "Well, it can't be good. You're living without your father, aren't you?" Silently, David continued to kick the dirt. "Cheer up," Jacob said. "I heard from my brother that some wealthy foreigners have arrived from Jerusalem. Apparently, they came to see King Herod about something that clearly upset him." "What?" David asked. "Well, somehow the king has heard of the happening here." "Really? Then why didn't he send someone out to honor the little king?" "I'm not really sure. My brother just said Herod seemed upset. I don't think Herod would like the idea of there being any other kings, Messiah or not. He's always afraid for his throne." That would be no surprise, David thought to himself. Everyone joked that it was safer to be Herod's pig than his relative in the palace. Being a Jew, he wouldn't kill pigs. "Well," Jacob concluded, "perhaps you will have a chance to meet these foreigners. Maybe you can earn a coin or two watering their camels for them. I've heard they're very generous." David ran down the dusty path that led out of town toward Jerusalem. Sure enough, Jacob was right. The boy spotted a camel caravan, and it looked like a very wealthy one. Approaching them, David bowed. "May I be of service to you?" he called. "Perhaps I can help you find a place to stay in our fine town, draw water for your beasts." Several men seemed to be especially prominent in the caravan, and each had a servant or two. The one with the curly beard spoke first. "Yes, boy," he said. "We don't want to stay in any one of those little village inns unless we have to. If there isn't a house we can rent, we'd like to pitch our own camp, if we can do it near your home in a safe place." "Follow me," David said as he led them toward town. He knew a large open area behind his home on the edge of the village where they could put up their canopies for the night. Everyone knew everyone else in Bethlehem, and now that the registration and taxing was over, it was relatively safe to camp outside. He stuck his head in the door. "Mother," he shouted, "I brought some people who'll be camping outside." With a sigh, she said, "I'll make some more bread." Hospitality could be so demanding. David watched, amazed, as the visitors erected their tents and settled in for the night. Their temporary shelters were nicer than the home he and his family lived in. "Boy," said the one with a curly beard again, "if you wish to water our camels, we will reward you handsomely. But a word with you first. Have you any important people in this town? Oh, that depends what you mean, the boy answered. We are looking for a baby prince, the man continued. A darker foreigner joined them. Yes, he said. We saw his star in the east. There should be a baby prince who will grow up to be a great king, and he was born here in this small country. Yet when we went to Jerusalem and inquired of your present king, he knew nothing of this. Well, he knows now, chuckled the curly-haired one, and he wishes us to let him know if we find the prince so he can come worship him too. David raised his eyebrows, as did the dark foreigner. Ah, look at the lad, the man said. I get the impression he doesn't believe that. The curly-haired one held out his hand. A gold coin for your thoughts, boy. For a moment, David stared at the ground. It was dangerous to say things against the Romans, but perhaps a comment about Herod would not get him into too much trouble. The curly-haired one held out the gold coin. David took it. I was thinking, he said, that Herod says many things, but many people who think Herod thinks highly of them end up not thinking at all, because they're dead. That is certainly possible, suggested still another of the foreigners who had come to listen. Courts are always filled with intrigue and treachery. Then this one will be no different, David hinted. Thank you, the curly-haired one commented. Then he gave him another gold coin. And this is for watering the camels. David had never had so much money in his life. The coins he had known before had been small, and of copper or a shiny white metal. He had seen gold coins held by rich people, but had never actually touched one. Thank you, he said. Your camels will be well taken care of. He led the animals to the trough in the common area of the village and began pulling up bucket after bucket of water. His arms hurt and his back ached, yet those hairy, smelly beasts continued to drink. I should have known it would be worth a gold coin to water you, David growled. I've heard of you evil beasts. You walk for days and days asking for no water at all, and then you take advantage of a poor boy like me and expect to drink the entire well dry. I think all you camels are a curse. Camel he spoke to eyed him languidly with its liquid brown eyes and continued to chew its cud, but the one next to it eyed him with cold indifference and then spat. Oh, that's disgusting, David complained, wiping the slime from his face and neck. No more water for you if you're just going to spit. It was a big job, but he finally finished and led the camels back to the campsite. By now, Mother was out talking to the men and had been able to sell them all 12 of the large flat bread loaves she had made. Boy, asked the curly-haired one as David tied the last camel to its stake, have there been any babies born in this town? We have followed a star from far away. It led us to Jerusalem and then to this town, yet you say there is no one rich and important here. Well, there is no one rich and important here. However, we did have something odd that some of my friends call the happening. The man nodded and drew out another gold coin. Tell me about it. Well, it all started one night when we were out in the field with the sheep. It was lambing time, so we had to stay out there with them. David's baby brother began to wail. The boy picked him up, but his mother said, You go ahead and talk to the men, David. I'll take him in and feed him. She scooped the child from the little pallet he'd been lying on while she passed out the bread to the men, and carried him back toward the house while David continued his story. As David concluded, the men began rapidly speaking to each other in another language. Then the curly-haired one turned back to him. It is he whom we have come to see. You must take us to him immediately. I can do that, David bowed. Did you know my brother was born almost the same time? Oh, that's very nice, the man said, dismissing him with a nod. Now take us to the house of the baby Messiah. David eyed the excited men. We were wondering if he really was the Messiah, since no one's been here from the temple to worship him. The men frowned. We care nothing for the temple of the Jews, said the curly-haired one shortly. We have read the prophecies in ancient scriptures, even Jewish prophecies, and we have seen his star. Why would there be any doubt? Is this not the time even your people expect the Messiah to arrive? The lad said nothing. Then take us to him immediately. Turning, David led the men into the dusty little town to the tiny house rented by the couple. The young mother was playing with her baby in the shade beside the house, but seeing the men approaching, she scooped him up and ran inside the dwelling. The men gathered at the doorway, and the curly-haired one spoke again. "Please, don't be afraid," he said. "We have come to worship the child." The woman eyed him hesitantly. The father came running from the carpentry project he'd been working on 2 houses over. Again the curly-haired one spoke. "Don't be alarmed. We are not here to hurt your wife or the child, but to worship him. My people have seen his star in the east, and we followed it, and we bring gifts." The father stood with his mouth agape as the servant stepped forward. "We brought you much gold," the curly-haired one explained, "and frankincense and myrrh. Look, these gifts are for him." Then they fell on their knees. After bowing low, the curly-haired one continued, "I speak for the others because we are from different places and the languages are difficult. But we all honor the young king. It puzzles us that your country has not honored him, but they will soon. We told the ruler in Jerusalem about him." "Herod?" Joseph asked cautiously. "Yes," the man nodded. "He said he would like to know where the king was, so he could worship him too." The couple looked at each other. Mary smiled with delight, but worry and concern flickered across Joseph's face. The baby started to cry, and the men excused themselves and returned to their campsite. Young David received more gold and a piece of beautiful Eastern silk for his mother. He thanked the men, then returned to his little house. After giving the fabric to his mother, he carefully pried up one of the stones around the fire pit and buried the gold coins there. His mother nodded. "That is wise, my son. Lord knows we'll need those." The Almighty did know that, I agreed. That's why he was providing for the events that were just about to burst upon them. This broadcast has come from the book Victory of the Warrior King by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.